My name is Sean Brown. I'm the CEO of Motorized Precision, and today we're going to be unboxing the EVO robot. In this training series, you'll see all the way from unboxing to setting up the robot to programming the robot, everything you need to know along the way. Let's take a look now at our top-down view. So a few things to know about EVO in general. Obviously it's single phase power, so you can take it with you on the go. It can be run on battery power, but do know that it's not protected from the elements. So if you're outside, that's fine. It should be a nice day or somewhere that's not too dusty or rainy or anything, because it won't protect itself from the dust and the rain like your DSLR might, or even like some of the cinema cameras these days might. So treat it respectfully in that way. The cables are not sealed for the elements as well. So just make sure that you're cleaning and protecting and wrapping your robot. If you're going to be taking it on location, treat it with respect in that way to make sure that it lasts a lifetime. If you get the hard case, this is what it will look like. In here, EVO sits really nice in this custom foam case. You'll have the robot with the Mitchell mount attached, the controller, and all your accessories in the accessory pocket. Part one of our series, we're going to be talking about how to physically set up the EVO robot. So your EVO robot probably came with a Mitchell mount adapter plate plus the Mitchell mount itself. So the first thing we're going to do is just unscrew the crown and stick this in the Mitchell. You'll see if you haven't worked with Mitchell before, there's a keyway. You're going to line up one of these keyways on your tripod with that, and then you're going to put the Mitchell crown all the way on there, super tight, so your robot does not fly off the tripod. Next, we're going to actually put the EVO robot onto the tripod. So it's only 44 pounds, so we're just going to lift it up and place it on. I'm going to spin the robot till I find my 4 holes. I like to put the cables towards the back of where we're going to be, away from our filming. So there's our holes. Included in your kit was this bag and this tool. This will be all you need to connect the robot. We're just going to put these in there. If you have any lineup problems, you can shake the top of the robot, and that will get those holes to fit nice. You're just going to screw in each one of these. Again, you can shake the robot a little bit, get those holes to line up nicer. So once you get them in as tight as you can by hand, we're going to use our tool to go the rest of the way. Or as you're going down, you can use the top part of the tool. And then we're going to use this part of the tool and go as hard as we can. It's going to be about 20 Newton meter if you wanted to use another tool to get exactly right. I like to go just as hard as I can by hand. That does the trick. Our final bolt here. And again, this tool comes with the robot, so you don't need to worry about having a tool for this part of it. Another option that comes with your system is the desk clamp. Instead of putting these 4 bolts into the Mitchell mount, you'll just put them into this square piece of metal, and then this will sit on top of any flat surface, and your clamps will just come in and clamp it to the surface. We're going to move it like this and unclamp. So we just put this like this and then clamp it down. And this is another very secure way of moving and having your robot on a surface that it's fully usable as long as the table or whatever surface you're on is sturdy.
You can shoot upside down or sideways or anything else other than the standard pose. You need to make a change on the web interface for EVO. So you'll go to your IP address with the port number is 18333. That'll take you to a page that looks like this. You click on the gear icon, and under the settings, you'll go to coordinates. And then there's a quick mounting access here. So you can choose ceiling, wall, up, down, left, right, etc. In our case today, we're going to use ceiling. You hit save, and that's it. If you don't do this, it will fault the moment you try to run your robot.
You can see mine is already attached. All we're going to do is place the plate on the end of the robot and use the 4 included bolts to bolt it in. Also included in most kits is the camera plate and the adapter plate. Now we have our adapter installed. You'll see on the bottom of the camera plate, there's a few of these guideways. These guideways are held on by this little screw that's attached there. And then we're going to attach this with just our single screw and make sure that this plate is in one of those guideways. There we go. And then we're going to tighten this up. And then our attached camera plate will go on. Of course, your camera will go in there. And once that's attached, you'll have a plate. It only comes with 1 screw. I've added a second one, which I would suggest you do as well if you have a larger setup like a Red. So that bottom plate I installed and the camera adapter plus plate are all add-ons. Just to be clear, that the robot itself comes with just the robot, the controller, the mount for the desk clamp, and your cables. Everything else is an add-on. The next thing we're going to do is plug in your included controller. There's 2 items. There's the plug that goes to the wall. Now, this will either be 110 for the US or a similar looking plug for 220 in Europe. Then you'll have the camera connection side. So this is a plug that is universal, goes in the same on each way. You're just going to literally line it up and push it in. That's all you do to plug it in, and then you push on the top to remove it. Now we're going to plug this into the ground over here. We have just regular 110 going to the wall. And then the other side of this is going to go to the back of the robot. We're going to open up our tab. You'll hear a click. And then we're going to come over here and turn on the robot. When you first turn on the robot, you'll hear a little beep to indicate that it's turned on. And as soon as the robot program is running in the background, you'll hear 3 little beeps. Let's wait and listen for them now. The next step we're going to do is plug in our Ethernet. This one is included if you're working very closely, perhaps with the desk clamp or some setup where you can be very close. I'm going to use one that I have. Otherwise, you can go out, and just provide your own Ethernet of whatever length you need. We're going to plug it in right here into the LAN port, LAN. Another thing to note while you're here is the IP of this particular robot. Each robot will have their own unique IP address, and you will need to put this into MP Studio. So this robot is 210. The next thing we're going to do is take the other end of our Ethernet and plug it into our computer. In this case, I have a hub because I'm going to be plugging in several things. I'm just going to plug it right in there. And once the robot is on, you'll see some green lights indicating that you have a connection. So the next step we're going to do is inside of your Mac or PC, we're going to set up the network settings so we can communicate with the EVO and get it out of its shipping position. We have two things going on the screen. I have my software open and I have my network settings open. So you're going to want to navigate to your network settings. You'll see here that I have EVO set up. You remember before I had 210 as my IP address on the side of the robot. So you're going to want to configure a new network by adding a service in a Mac. You're going to name it, let's say EVO 3. In this service, we're going to go to Details. We're going to go to Manual, and we're going to type in that IP 192.168.1. And then we have to change the last 3 digits. It cannot be the same as the robot. So we have 210 for a robot, so maybe I'll just do 222. And then we're going to do 255, 255, 255, and 0 for our sub-net mask. So there we see EVO is connected. And if I go back here, we have 2 different EVOs. In my case, I'm just going to delete the one I just made because I already have that part done. We're going to go into our network settings. I can get there by just clicking on Wi-Fi settings, and then go to network. We want to make sure that our EVO is the first thing to communicate. We want to make sure that EVO is top of the list. So when I go to set service order, EVO is all the way down here. I want to drag it all the way to the top and then hit OK. So now EVO will be at the very top, and that's going to be the first thing that the computer prioritizes when it comes to communication. So after you've established your network, we're going to go into MP Studio. Here we're showing the Pro version of MP Studio, but if you have the Lite, it will all be the same for this part of the video. You just won't see as many options in Lite. So we're going to be going into our Robot tab, and down here to where it says Robot Connection. In here, this is where you want to put in your IP address. So it might say something else by default. So let's say I hit this, and it's 237. We want to do 210, or whatever your particular IP address is. So after you press that, we're going to restart MP Studio. Boom, we're back. There we go. Once MP Studio starts back up, you'll see that your IP address is correct, and your robot is now green. So we're going to be moving the robot just to get the camera on and get started. So you do need to go through the networking process the very first time to get this going, to get the robot to move. So we're going to go to the Rehearse tab, and in here, we're just going to delete any project stuff, and we're going to say reset our robot. So when you see that reset, everything will turn green, and you'll be good to go with the robot. We can make a default keyframe like this, and you'll see that the robot is in its default state here. We can use this little button over here, which is the Go to Position button, to send the robot to a position. And you'll see on the screen now that the robot is actually moving, and we can turn on our live robot view, and that will show when the robot's in a new position as well. There we go. So for instance, if I move my keyframe, you'll see the live robot has now moved to position. So now we are ready to put our camera on. So let's go take a look at how to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is put the camera on. But what I noticed when I walked over was that our mount is about 90 degrees off if I was to put my camera on. So I want to actually turn this facing outward, because when I made that default keyframe, the camera is actually facing forward. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to loosen this up enough that it can tighten up like this. Put that little plate on top of my camera. We're going to make sure this is fully open, and then latch in our camera, and we're good to go. In the next step, we're going to put some cables up the side of the arm. So this really depends on what camera you're using. If you're using an iPhone, autofocus, you might not need anything else. In my case, I've opted for, a one-channel fizz. I want to get some SDI out. So these are all optionary things that you can do. And I've made myself a little cable bundle, which you can do too, with just off-the-shelf cables. I'm going to strap it to the arm with just off-the-shelf parts. So for this part, it's really how you want to do it. I'm just going to, bring the camera end of my cables over here underneath axis 3 and put a bongo tie on there. Honestly, everybody bundles their cables a little bit differently. I'm also going to bring another tie and put it right here in order to avoid scratching my EVO. And then we're just going to plug our cables in. So I have an SDI cable so I can see the video. We have a cable for power into our fizz system. Your fizz system, if you got the one channel, will be a little bit different. And I'll be following this video up with a video specifically on the one channel system, showing you how we're going to use the ports on the robot to avoid some of these extra cables that we don't need. Those all my cables are plugged in. Next thing I'll do is plug in the other side into the computer and into the power supply that I bought for myself and turn the camera on. Now that we have the camera plugged in and all the accessories on the camera connected to our computer system, we're going to go over a few other things. So in the setup screen here, you can see our robot is connected. My red is connected. For the red settings, this is the default IP that you can use, but you can also reference some camera connection documents that we have for how to set up the camera. Our fizz is connected here. You can see I have my one channel for focus, and my gamepad is connected, and when I move it, you can actually see what's moving in the screen, and you can configure the gamepad to be any way you want in this configurator down here, just by clicking on a new profile. If you're on MP Lite, you won't see as many devices, or anything that you've added onto the software will appear here. In the setup screen, we have our robot. We already talked about robot connection. You can change how it views in the software. Like in our case, we're going to use the O'Connor tripod because we're going to be on a tripod. In the camera settings, you can manage your database, manage your lenses. In the fizz settings, if you have a single channel or a 3-channel, you can manage that in there as well. This is another one of those accessories that I would definitely add on if you want that tactile feel. There is an on-screen control inside of MP Studio if you don't opt for the actual physical hardware of a gamepad. Xbox controller, PS5, both work. If you don't have a controller, you can still jog the robot on screen by using this on-screen controller. I want to go forward and do that. So that's just another way of moving the robot. The next thing we're going to go over is the payload calibration. We're going to have to get into the robot's backend in order to do that. So we're going to open up a web browser, in this case, Google Chrome. Here you can see I'm in the backend. So you're going to actually dial in into your browser's window here, the IP address of the robot with this :18333. So for instance, if I type in 192.168.1.210, then you can see I already have the information in here, but this is what you will enter, :18333. Then when you press enter, you'll see we get into this backend. This is sort of like your industrial pendant or industrial backend. Next, we're going to go to this gear icon. We're going to go to TCP. You can see the last TCP we ran, but we're going to hit new. And then it says, please input a name for this payload. That part doesn't really matter as much. going to say red. By clicking the identification, the robot before a series of movements, that's totally fine. We're going to do that. Now it wants us to put in the payload as far as, weighing your camera on a scale or guessing based on the manufacturer's spec. So I'm just going to put in 6. Actually, ours is like 5.5, but I'll put in 6 kilograms. So just, I'm sorry, this only has 5. So we're going to put in 5 kilograms. That's the max of this robot. Even if you're, sometimes we may put a number that's higher in the software. That just helps with some of the curves. But in general, 5 is what we'll put here if you're near the max. And then I'm going to do next. And we're going to kind of wait. So it says this process can take about 5 minutes. You'll see that our robot is moving in the background. So I'll show you some of this. And then we're just going to kind of wait for this process. You can see in my countdown, we're 4% in, we're 5% in, and the robot's just moving around. Okay, we are 100% done. So now you can see these new indications here. We have CX at negative 15.45, CY at negative 6.53, and CZ at 117.41. So we're going to take that information and go into MP Studio and enter that under our camera and payload. So in this case, I'm going to keep my mass a little bit heavier because we're going to kind of cheat the robot and tell it that it's a little heavier to get a little smoother curves, even though we're maxing out the payload. So, but for CX, we're going to do negative 15.45. For CY, we're going to do negative 6.53. And we're going to do 117.41 per Z. And then we're going to hit save. And okay. So now we have our new payload in there. So we won't need to use anything here anymore. So we don't need to do any of this. And then we can, move on. We don't even need to hit save because we're going to be pushing this over. So you can just close this window and be ready to go. So now all that payload is saved in there and it's saved with our camera. We're able to go in here and start making moves again. So I'm just going to send my camera to its default position by hitting reset, making my default keyframe and saying go to position. Next, we're going to talk about setting up your XYZ on your camera so that you can roll, pan, and tilt from the correct area. So the first thing we're going to do is measure down from the end of axis 6, where the silver meets our camera plate. And there's 2 ways to do this. Some people like to measure to the sensor mark and write that down. I like to measure to the center of the lens. I want to rotate right around the center of the lens. So we're going to do that. We're going to kind of look at the center of our lens here. It seems to be right around where this tick mark is actually. And we're going to measure down from there. And it looks to be about 3.5 inches. So 3.5 inches. So we're going to go over to the software and I'll show you where to enter that in right now. So where we're going to enter that tool position is back in the camera. Under tool offsets, we're actually going to do our sensor offset. So we're going to open up that pen tool. We're going to type in 3.5 inch 2 millimeter. And you'll see it's 88.9. What that does, if I go back to my rehearsal room and I have a keyframe here, you'll see that when I make a keyframe, it's going from the center of that lens and where I'm lined up on here. You can see our model kind of matches up. So that's when we rotate our camera, it's going to rotate from the center of the lens as best it can. Now, your model here might not match your real world model. Don't worry about that. This is just a visual reference. As long as you measured correctly, then you will be rotating from the correct area. You can go into more in depth and do the whole nodal setup. For this, I recommend watching our nodal video. We have a very detailed, well-illustrated video about nodal, and we're going to link it below. Go ahead and check that out if you need the complete nodal setup, which is helpful for post-production if you're going to be exporting moves, or if you want to move exactly around nodal. The next thing we're going to show is lens calibration and lens mapping. So inside of your camera, again, we're going to go into the managed lenses. In here, we're just going to make a new lens. If you know the manufacturer and it happens to be on this list, you can select it. If not, you can say other and type one in. I have a Sigma on there. I have an EF mount. It is the 18 to 35, so I can use this particular model. If your lens is not in here, these are just visual references. It doesn't have to be in here. It doesn't have to be correct. These are just a few models that we provide that allow you to have something that looks approximate to your lens. I have my particular lens in here, so I'm going to use that. It is a zoom, but if you had a prime, you can just switch it right here. So our minimum stop, I believe, is 2.0, maybe. I'm going to have my camera person assist me today because they're going to be next to the robot and I'm going to be communicating with them. If you were doing this solo, you can just have this system right next to the robot and set up your lenses like that. In this case, I'm going to be communicating with somebody over at there. So I believe our iris is at 2.0, right? That's the minimum stop. Yep. Minimum focal length for this particular lens is 18. The max is 35. I'm going to nickname it Sean's EVO lens. Okay. It is Imperial, and I'm going to do Smart Focus. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to Focus, and I'm going to follow my little guide here. So this says set a tick of the closest focus without the actual close focus. So my assistant here is going to tell me when I'm there. So this would be the absolute bottom. It's usually above that. Okay, so right here, and I believe it's 11 inches is the closest for my lens. So I'm going to type in 11 inches and then commit. So then we're going to go to the furthest tick. But here's a little trick about this lens. The furthest tick is 90 feet. If you feel like you're never going to be in 90 feet and you want to use the closest one next to that, then do that. You'll get a better mapping overall. So we're going to do that. We're going to look for our 30 feet or 60 feet, whatever's next. So we're going to go right here and have 30 feet. I'm going to type that in and then commit. And then you'll see we're just following these steps here. It says set a tick of the distance closest to the middle position of the slider. I'm just going to find a tick anywhere around here. And it's going to be, what is our feet in inches? 4 feet. So we're going to say commit. Next, set a tick of the distance between the middle tick and the close tick. So it's going to be somewhere around here. Okay. Right there. 2 feet. And we're going to say commit. And then we're going to move to our last one, which is going to be somewhere in this vicinity, probably around 10 feet, somewhere around there. Okay. So this would be our 10 feet and then commit. And then we can hit the word generate, and that will generate all of our ticks for us. So I'm going to jump to 3 feet, and this should have jumped to 3 feet on the lens. This should jump to 2 feet on the lens, etc. So now I could do iris and zoom, but since I only have a single channel, and most of you only have a single channel, we're just going to hit save and close at this point. And then done. And then on our lens here, we can go find Sean's EVO lens. So this will be the lens that we can use. And now when we come in here and make a focus keyframe, you know, if I pull up to 6 feet, you'll see that we are at 6 feet. So that is how you will calibrate your lens, and you can go in and make a new lens profile for every lens that you own or a lens that you might be renting at the time. And then you can also, since you have a single channel, you can dial in your focus and zoom as a fixed rate. So in our case, let's go to like a 5/8 to 8 split on the iris for me. You'll see on the monitor here, we're going to go down a little more, a little more, a little more. There we go. That looks nice. Okay. So we're stopping down a bunch, and then maybe put me at like a 20 or so, 20 to 22, somewhere around there on the lens, zoom. There we go. Cool. So that's where I'll fix my zoom, and then I'll be able to pull focus on anything I want. So let's jump over to the rehearse room and talk about some of the basics of MP Studio and how to move the EVO robot. So here we are in the rehearse room. The rehearse tab is made up of several panes. We have our contextual pane on the left side of the screen. We have our 3D viewer in the center of the screen. Next to that, we have a monitor tab, which is showing our live feed, which in our case is a cyc wall. And then we have our settings tab. In there, you can control different camera settings. You can see I'm changing the ISO, and then you can change the frame rate, the shutter angle, etc. of supported cameras, which are Canon, Red, Phantom, and ARRI cameras. You can still use any other camera, of course, in our system. You just will have to control it manually. Below this is a timeline from left to right, starting at 0, going all the way down in time. You can see here I have a default keyframe. I'm going to delete that for now. And we're going to start another default keyframe just by clicking this box right here. That will make a default keyframe. This keyframe has tools like this transform tool. I press R, you can get to a rotation tool. You can also get to these same tools by clicking up in this tool menu. This will allow you to offline move your robot. So we've made our keyframe over here. There's a couple things you can do. You can move it offline and then choose the go to position module, and you'll see the live robot here will move to position. You can actually see the video changing over here. I'll turn down the ISO a little bit. There we go. Another thing you can do is jog the robot with the controller. So we're just going to move the robot like this. I usually watch the live robot while this is happening. So you see I can look off of the background there and see around. And we can see the live robot moving in our software. If I wanted to make a new keyframe, I can press X on the controller, and that will create a live keyframe from the live position. If I wanted to, make a small move, I can just move up or down on the controller and then maybe pan over a little bit and then make a new keyframe. So you'll notice that the camera has a gap here. That's because we have set up what's called a tool position. So when we're starting to work with our camera, we want to make sure that we are telling the camera and the software where we want to control and manipulate this camera from. So you see here, where is the rotation point? Where is my translation coming from? It's going to come from our sensor offsets and our tool position. So in this case, we take a physical measurement down from the inside of axis 6 here. So that would be right here at the end of the robot. And we measure down to the sensor mark, which is either on the side of the camera, one of these sides. There's a little sensor witness mark here. Here, I'll pan over here. You can usually see it there. I think we have the ghost robot in the way of the real robot. It's usually a mark right there. There it is. So that's where we're measuring down to, and we put this number right here. You click the little pen tool. So in our case, let's say it's like 4.5 inches or so. We would say 4.5 inch to millimeter, and that would type one in. And that would adjust the move. So you can see here, based on that adjustment, maybe the move that we did before isn't valid or something has changed. So we're going to turn off the live control. We can always, update our keyframe. We can use live control and just update that to here. I just put X on the keyboard. So now we have a move with our updated keyframe for where our sensor really is. If you want to rehearse a move, you'll click on the rehearse button. You can choose a speed. Right now, if the move was a 2-second move and we ran at 100, it would be a 2-second move. If you run at 25%, it will run as an 8-second move. These buttons are just a quick way to scale your move speed. So we're going to try a 2-second version. You'll see that it's going to go to position over here. And once the live robot and the simulation robot line up, you'll see go. So then we run our robot and the real robot moves. We're also going to do MP Touch as another way of moving the robot besides jogging it. So when you go to this MP Touch icon, you want to make sure your payload is set correct. In my case, this is the correct payload. So we're going to hit enable. You can come over to the robot and double click this button to activate MP Touch, and then move your robot into position. And then double click your robot again to hold that position, go back to your computer and create a keyframe. In order to keep this particular robot secure, I am going to put some sandbags. I'm going to put 3 25-pound sandbags total on this robot. One on each leg, right in the middle of the leg. We can operate without them, but this is a much more secure way of operating. For today's demo, we're going to set up a subject that we can see in the software. Just going to put this right over our control box here and put our little subject at the front. So I'm going to make a new tab by pressing the plus button right here, and we'll call this a robot. We can name it by double clicking, and then I'm going to grab my gamepad, unlock my controller, and come down until I see my subject here. That sound you hear is when the robot goes into a straight line. So I'm going to just come out a bit and we're going to film our subject a little bit further back. Looks like the robot faulted there for a moment. It could just be due to how much pressure I have on the cables and this particular payload. So if I'm happy where we're at, I'm going to press the keyboard. But what I do see is something with the red we could change is auto white balance, or try to work with our white balance. I'm also going to adjust some of our live settings on the actual red itself to make our image look a little cleaner. We're going to go to a 5.6 and we're going to go to about a 24mm lens. I think that would be a good for this particular setup. That looks much nicer on our screen here. So we'll set a keyframe. You can tell we're a little off level, so we can roll our camera till we feel like that is nice and level. Another trick you can do is just level this number right here to 0, and then use that same go to position, and that will level out the shot. The next thing we're going to do is set our focus. If you haven't mapped your lens yet, go ahead and take a look at the lens mapping section in the table of contents, and that will show you how to map a lens. So we're going to select our mapped lens and we're going to pull focus. So I'm going to go for that little motor in the middle there, or just around the body of the robot. That looks nice. I'm going to scroll down and say set target. So what this did was this set a target in 3D space where I pulled focus on that little robot. So I'll close that panel for now. Then no matter where I go, so let's say I go back to jogging and we're in target mode, if I move the robot and jog with it, it will hold onto that location and pull focus automatically on that as well. So let's say I wanted to come down for a hero angle for my next shot. I can go to maybe 2 seconds later and come back a little bit and create a keyframe. So now that keyframe will be target tracked as well and will pull focus on its own. So I've only made one focus keyframe that got created automatically, and I have 2 positions. So let's run our robot. We'll do a 2-second move, which is 100%. I'm going to initialize to our start position and then run, and that's our move. If we wanted to change this, let's say we wanted to go up instead, we can just drag our second keyframe up. That will still automatically pull focus. So I'm going to go to our start position and then run. And now we're going up instead of down. We can also change this keyframe type. By default, we are choosing linear, but if we go to Bezier, and I click on our Bezier handles here, I can zoom in with our mouse, our middle wheel. I'm going to hold Shift and click on this other one. And now we can drag both of those together if we wanted a little circle like this. Might not be quite noticeable on this particular move, but we can take a look at it. So I'll go in reverse. Yeah, I gave it a little bit of extra movement. And you can just keep building up from here. Let's say I like this as a linear instead. But then from here, at the 5-second mark, I can either turn on my live control and drag, or since we already have a target, I can just kind of come over, come down. You see we're a little bit out of the reach of the robot here. And we have to be careful because we're shooting in a tight spot, and you can see the axis 4 wants to wind with that EVO logo there. So we want to make sure not to wind up axis 4 too much. So let's say we just want to go further back instead. So now we come up here, it pauses for a moment, and then we slowly drift back. So let's take a look at what that looks like. If we needed more room, we'd probably just move our subject a little bit away from the base, and that would give us more room. So now we have this nice clean look here. It's still, very much in focus. Looks pretty nice. And nice smooth moves. So yeah, so that's basically how to do the most simple moves in MP Studio. From here, we can get a little more complex. If for position 2, you wanted it to be continuous, we can always change this to continuous. And then the curve will just be, instead of a hard stop there, it would just be one continuous curve. And what we would do here is turn on position and roll as being the things we want to go straight through. What we're seeing though, it might be a potential for a small bounce here because we're traveling in one direction being up, and then instantaneously we want to travel in another direction down. So we can always, look at that curve and see what it would look like both from speed and from position. So it's not too bad, but let's take a look in the real world. So we'll go to our start position and we'll run our robot. Yeah, you can feel it a little bit. So what we'll probably do is we can change this to a Bezier, and on this handle here, we can manipulate our curves a little bit. Looks like this one only goes in and out. So that's already a little bit smoother. And we can also, if we wanted to, change this to a Bezier. If I press 1, that will hide the visible robot, which is this simulated robot right here. And then we can look just at the curves. So you see here we can smooth this out by manipulating this as a Bezier now. So if I wanted to do this and then change our Bezier handles a little bit here. That would potentially smooth this out. So we can always look at this, grab this handle and bring this back to a straight line. All this is something that you can manipulate to see how smooth you want something to be. Okay, so let's take a look at the real world. We'll go back to our start position and we'll run our robot. That's already much smoother. We're going to kind of come in here and put our subject kind of scrunched up somewhere around here, just beyond our robot and just a little bit beyond our leg here. And we're going to look to do a top down going from here to here. I'm going to grab my live controller. We have a little subject in front of us here. I'm going to square up with it best I can. So if you get to the edge of your robot, it does kill the connection. So you see here, I'm a little bit too far to the edge. So I got to push in a little bit with my controller. See, my robot's too far to the edge. So I'm going to have to push in a little bit. And then I can also slow down my controller. Right now, everything's a little too fast with how I'm moving the robot. There we go. So we'll go for something like this as a start. I will press X to make a keyframe. You can also press L on the keyboard to get a live keyframe. The next thing we will do is set a focus. I'm going to focus on that back axis 2 of this little robot here and say set target. The next thing we're going to do is go maybe 2 seconds later, set another keyframe, set this to orbit. You'll see our orbit is flat. We're going to have to change that angle to 180 degrees. Whoops, excuse me, 90 degrees. And then we're going to be able to offline jog our robot to a top down. You'll see that it gets to a flipping point, so you don't want to get that far. And we want to turn off level lock. So for things like this, at the top downs, you want to turn off level lock, and that's just the way the math works out. It won't work out that well if you don't do that. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Do a 2-second version of that. There we go. There you go. So we have it top down. We can always move. So if I turn on my center point here, like we can always move our target back a little bit. One way to do that live is to go into live jogging, go to target, and then grab our target. And then if we wanted to move it down a little bit, that would move it like that. Now we can turn off live jogging, go in reverse here. And now we have our top-down shot. Run it again. There we go. Run it again. Very nice. Any small little jitters that you might see, you can easily get out in post-production. So we're going to be going over scenes. This is a pro feature because we're an MP Studio Pro, but it's also an add-on feature that you can add on to Lite. So once I've created my scene, I'm going to enable it. In here, I can match things to the real world. So you can see in our scene behind us, we have a paper backdrop. So if I wanted to add like a cyc wall, one-sided, I can bring this floor up to like here. And then let's say I want to panel 2 up and view camera. So for one of these, I want to view perspective. There we go. And then I can match this gray by scrolling down, edit color, find this gray somewhere, maybe darker gray, something like that. So now my cyc wall through my camera, if I make a keyframe here. Now, in order to manipulate my camera, you see I've made a keyframe, but I can't manipulate it. I have to turn off the live. You can do that by hitting the short key E. So E will allow me to move my camera, have a camera in the scene. And then if I press E again, we're back to editing the scene. So it's important to enable and disable the scene editing. But you see we have a table in the shot here and a little model of a robot. So we want to set up something similar to that. So I'm going to set up just a box in this case. And then this box is in millimeters. So, I'm going to put that over in the scene. And then I'm going to measure in the real world what my box is. So I'm going to come over here and just grab some quick measurements. My height is about 30 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. So we're going to scroll down to our scale here, and we're going to say on Y 30 inches, so 30 inch to millimeter. And then we're going to say for X, it's 12 inch to millimeter. And then on Z, we're going to do 12 inch to millimeter. And there we go. We basically have the rough size of our pedestal here. I'm going to put it right by the foot here and over. And that's roughly where it is. So if I was to make a live keyframe, we would basically be seeing something similar. And this might even be too tall. We can line it up like this. And if for some reason your frustum does not match our real lens, we can go in here, frustum, and I think we're at a 22. I could say 22, and that will match a little closer to what our actual camera is. You can see here, you might even need to come over a tiny bit to center that up. So we're a little closer to this. And then I don't have a little robot in here, but I'll try to find something. So if we go to import, I'll see what I have in here. Here's an old KUKA robot. Let's see if I import that, what that looks like. So if you import models, sometimes you'll have to scale them appropriately. We're going to go back to our KUKA model. Hit millimeter. You can see it there in the scene. It's a little tiny guy. There we go. The centimeter was the right one. Get it to actual scale. But in this case, we want it to be much smaller. So if I bring it up here and put it on here, I can go to the scale. Right now the scale is at 10. So if I went to 1, 1, and 1, you gotten a lot closer. So maybe it's 1.5, 1.5, and 1.5. That probably gets it a little closer to what we want to see. Obviously, it's not exactly the same robot, but you can kind of see that if I was to, live jog around, you can see we're moving around in our scene and our table is there, for instance, looking down at it. Yeah, so that's some brief scene things. There's a couple other things you can do in scene besides colorizing our backdrop here. We can add some lights. So let's say I have a point light. I wanted to add that to my scene. Like that can be for the model. We can also go to our pencil tool and turn off the overhead lights. So this, you'll be able to see really clearly what you're seeing from the point light. And then, of course, that can light the backdrop. Here, I'll push this over for now. push this over for now. Yeah, so this backlight can light a lot of the scene here. You can change the light parameters. I wanted the intensity to go up, or I wanted different fall off and decay. So I can do something like this with this light. Perhaps have it a little bit away from there, a little bit higher. We can also duplicate this light, have more of them. Separate our lighting out a little bit like this. We can also have a separate light for the robot, perhaps. Let's say we wanted to do a spotlight. So I can hit rotation or the R key and rotate this just to 90-degree down and just do a spotlight for this whole scene right here. I could color this, if I wanted to be a blue light or something. You can also change the fall off and intensity. My angle, I can make it really narrow. We come in pretty close. Soften up my focus, maybe increase my intensity a little bit. I can, hide or mute some of these other lights in the backdrop as well. It looks like our light needs to come over a little bit to be on that pedestal. Obviously, you can get more intense and less intense. So yeah, you do a lot in here, all sorts of different things. You can also bring in animations and edit that. And then if you didn't, want your scene to show up, all right, there's some tearing because my floor and my 3D is a little close together. But, again, if you were to just go over here, move your playhead, like I'm frozen. Possible that's something I did with our models here. Wants us to freeze MP Studio. So if that happens, we're just going to hit save and open it back up. If anything ever goes wrong, it's best to just turn it on, turn it off again. It's classic for both the hardware and the software. And we'll show you this during the training part. So then when the software loads, I'm just going to go File, Open Recent EVO Scene. That's going to open back up whatever I last saved. And then if I go to my scenes, it looks like I did not save in time. So I didn't save all that work. That is a bummer. There is something that we can look at though. In my settings, there's something called an autosave. So that happens every 10 minutes. Documents, MP projects. So we can go back and see if we have an autosave in my documents, MP project. And we have an untitled from 1237. So we can take a look at that. Go back to MP Studio, File, Open. Go to Documents, MP Projects, open this. There we go. Now if I just save over this, or File, Save As, EVO Scene, so now we know that I can pull that stuff back in case there's an issue. So I'm just going to make a keyframe, and we're going to push in here, and maybe, rotate up a little bit for a little hero shot on my second keyframe. Grab this red. So now we just have a shot like that. I can always add back in another light with some color if I wanted to. So here's my light. It's right before we did the color change on it. We'll just go to red instead. Angle it a little bit. Move it around. You can see how that affects the different parts of the robot. Backlight it or front light it. A lot of people got the accessory for their robot called the gripper. We're going to go into our camera settings here, and we're going to change from camera to EVO gripper. So now if we go back in here, you'll see that there's a gripper on the end of the robot. And it looks like this. So right now you can also see that I still have my camera on. And you can see Malo filming that gripper in our camera view here. So we're going to just rotate our robot like this so I can put my gripper on easily. And then I'm going to go to position, but let's also bring it a little closer over here and maybe up a little bit over here. Okay. I'm going to rotate my camera to this position right now. And maybe there we go. And then we're going to take our camera off and we're going to show you how to put on the gripper. I'm going to be powering off my camera and disconnecting all the cables. I'm then going to, of course, take off the camera. Next, we need to disassemble and take off everything having to do with the robot itself. So we're going to use both imperial and metric tools. We're going to want to put these back in a safe spot, of course, so you don't lose them. Next, we're going to remove this. So the gripper has to go directly on the interface from the robot. We're just going to take off our camera interface for now. This is, of course, the opposite of putting it on, just these 4 bolts. Now we have a gripper interface. The gripper will come with 2 screws. They both have Phillips head. We're going to attach it like this, and then there's a area that we will be plugging in the gripper. So there's 2 screws on the side here, so it only goes one way really. Okay, once we're fully good, I'm going to go back to the software and make sure that my payload is set down, and this is not on the camera payload. To quickly get to that payload, you can just click this button, and then you're going to type in 0.9 and then enable. That's going to enable us to move our robot around and be able to plug this in. But before they plug this in, we actually want to shut down the robot. So we're going to go and turn off the power. Once the robot is completely off, then we can plug in powered accessories. You don't want power running to this while you hot plug it in. You'll see on here, there's a little black tip. You're going to line that up on here with where that would go. You're going to hold that pressure in there and just spin this little screw. Okay, now your gripper is fully attached. We're going to power the robot back on. Always want to make sure you power off the robot before you attach the gripper. Very important. I'm going to go back to the software and start it up again, and then we can show you the features of this gripper through the software. Okay, here we are back in the software. You can see that the EVO is running when you start it over again. We're going to hit reset, and then I'm going to add a gripper keyframe. So from here, this is where I can position the gripper, and then if I hit this little button here, it will move the gripper. And then if I have that button live, you'll be able to see I can move it. So like this little button here is the live, like turn on the live position. So here I can just manipulate it, open and close by dragging this slider, or just clicking to a certain area and it will jump to that spot. So for instance, if I'm making a move in the timeline, I want to start here. I want the gripper to be open all the way. 2 seconds later, I want to move, forward or back a little bit. say I make a live keyframe here, and then I want another gripper keyframe to be fully closed here. So if I play it offline, it's just going to look like this. You won't see the gripper animate there, but it will go from open to close in that entire time frame. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to send the robot to a position, and then it's going to be open, and then it's going to be closing there. You're going to have to plan as you're doing shots, that the gripper keyframe is only going to actually work on the keyframe it's doing its stuff on. So at that point, it's going to close. So let's say I usually will then kind of create a pause keyframe here for a moment for it to actually grip something and make sure it's fully gripped before I then, make another keyframe and decide, okay, I'm going to come up from here and then, spin the gripper a little bit or something like that. So let's take a look at that again. If I go forward, I'm going to go back to my start. I'm going to open up that gripper and close the gripper and then move up. There you go. That's an example of how to use the gripper. Thanks for watching this tutorial series. You see, it's taken a long time for you to watch this video. I've grown a beard. So go ahead and rewatch it at any time, see the progression of the beard, and hit us up on the Slack or via email if you have any questions. Thanks again.